Succulents can be one of the most satisfying plants to grow, but they're not always as easy care as they're made out to be. I have done a ton of videos all about succulents, whether it comes to watering, propagating, mistakes to avoid when growing succulents, and more. Now, I have all of those videos individually here on YouTube and in a playlist, but sometimes people like a compilation. So I have compiled all of my succulent tip videos into one long YouTube video for you to enjoy, pause, come back to whenever you like. So these are all of my tips for growing happy, healthy succulents. In this video, I'm going to share my succulent tips for beginners. Succulents are great plants whose care can sometimes feel like a mystery, so I wanted to share some of my tips and tricks for growing happy, healthy succulents. So first of all, what are succulents? Succulent is really a generalized term for plants that retain water, usually in their leaves or their stems. So they're usually desert plants, which makes them really drought tolerant, and plants that prefer warmth. That will give you a good idea of the first step of their care. There are a ton of different varieties, from the Graptivarias to the Echeverias, Haworthias, Sedum, Crassulas, Agaves, even Euphorbia. So all these are different plants with slightly differing care, but they are all considered succulents. But don't get overwhelmed by that, because there is a lot of crossover of care of all these plants. So these plants can do well planted in containers. They can do really well planted in the ground if you have a warm climate. They can do well indoors or outdoors, just so long as their basic needs are being met. So my first tip for happy succulents is where you keep them. Placement of your succulents is really key to making them thrive. It all goes back to them being desert plants. They want to be kept somewhere warm and somewhere dry and somewhere bright. Succulents prefer a climate between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but they can tolerate temperatures up to 90 degrees and as low as 40. They're generally not frost resistant. So if you have your succulents outside, you'll want to bring them indoors if there's any danger of frost or freezing. That said, there are some varieties of succulents, such as Sempervivum, which is also known as hen and chicks, which can withstand colder weather and frost. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're experiencing very high temperatures over 90 degrees, you might want to either place your succulents indoors in the shade or under a shade cloth. My next tip for succulent newbies is light. Lighting is key for keeping your succulents looking good. Succulents need a lot of light to thrive. They are not low light bathroom dwelling plants. So if you do keep your succulents indoors, you'll want to keep them near a bright window or add a grow light. If you're in a warm climate, succulents do really well outdoors. Some do better in bright direct sunlight and others do better in bright indirect light. So that means bright filtered light or brighter shady spots. So the main thing to keep in mind is just keep them out of extremes. Really hot, bright sunlight can sunburn your plants. It can cause damage to the leaves, which you can't fix. On the other hand, a really dark corner is not going to make for a happy plant. Interestingly, your succulents will tell you if they're getting too much or too little light. The color of the leaves is the first clue. If your succulents are losing their bright colors and turning more greenish, or if the stems are getting elongated, they are not getting enough light. These Graptivaria Fred Ives are a great example. This one's getting a lot of light. It's nice purple color. The leaves are pretty compact, but just underneath is the same plant, which is not getting a lot of light, and it's very green. And if you look at the stem, there's a lot of space between each leaves, and that is the plant stretching to find more light. I had this cute little succulent indoors on a windowsill. It was stretching, as you can see, down between the leaves down at the bottom, and once I put it out on my bright patio, the leaves started going purple again, and there's a lot less space between the leaves. These Fred Ives, which are in really hot direct sunlight, they're almost yellow, they're dropping leaves. Some of these other plants nearby have kind of leaf damage, and that is a sign that they're getting a little bit too much light. So you can really control the color of your succulents by the light. Stressed succulents, now this is a copper tone sedum. When it is in the hot direct sunlight right there, it goes that beautiful rich orange color, whereas the same plant, which is in the shade, it's a lot more green. So you can kind of control the color of your plants by how much light they get. And a lot of it does depend on the variety. So this variety does turn bright orange with stress, good stress, lots of direct sunlight, and it turns more green in the shade with a lot more water and less stress. These Aeonium Voodoo do a great job of showing how light affects the color of your succulent. So these do get a lot of direct light, but you can see the parts of the leaves that aren't getting direct light. It's almost like a little suntan. They're much more green. So if you want brighter, more vibrant succulents, give them more light. Now, let's talk about watering succulents, as that seems to be the biggest mystery surrounding succulent care, and it really shouldn't be. Watering succulents is actually pretty straightforward when you're used to it. So I keep reiterating this, succulents are desert plants. They do not need to be watered very often, and they do not want to be in soggy soil. So succulents retain their moisture in their leaves. That's what makes them succulents. That is the defining characteristic of succulents. So in that sense, they can go for long, long stretches of time without being watered. And you need to keep that in mind when you're watering your succulent. You want to keep them dry most of the time. Overwatering is the main reason people kill their succulents. And what happens is the succulents take on too much water and their stems and their leaves begin to rot. And that's bad news for a succulent, because once it takes on rot, it's really hard to reverse the process and save it. People are always asking me, how often should I water my succulent? And that's the wrong question to be asking, because it totally depends on the conditions, right? So like this flower pot is very different to this flower pot, which is very different to this flower pot, which is also very different to a succulent that is planted directly into the ground. So rather than say something like water once a week or water once a month, really only water when the soil is completely dry. And that means you have to check the soil. So for example, this succulent arrangement, which is getting a little bit old and needs to be redone, I'm gonna just stick my finger in this soil, and this soil is completely bone dry. So I could water this. Whereas with this donkey's tail, I'm feeling that is wet. I do not need to water that. So even though there's parts of this plant which are looking a little bit, they look dry, I know I don't need to water this. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you have a plant like this that has gravel on the top and you can't just easily stick your finger in to tell. You could use a water meter, which just simply goes into the soil, and that's pretty dry, so that could be watered. I wouldn't want to water this if it's anywhere near the green. I'll only water this if it is at the red. And even more affordable than that is a chopstick. If you stick a chopstick in, now this is dirty because I use it for this purpose, but you stick it in, stick your chopstick in. If it comes out and has moisture on it, you know not to water. This one's bone dry, as we suspected, whereas, you know, if you had put it in here, which is wet, you can see that it's wet. If sticking your finger in soil is not your thing, you can also get clues about whether to water your succulents by how they look. So for example, this one is very dry, and you can actually tell by the plants. I don't even really need to look at the soil. If you can see this sedum, the leaves are wrinkled up and they're a little bit, you know, easy to move around. That is a sign that this is a thirsty succulent. This is how succulents survive. It is using the water in its leaves to sustain itself, and that's why they're getting wrinkled up. It's starting to lose its water. So you will want to water that and help it get its moisture back. So I've determined this succulent arrangement really is thirsty and it needs some water. So I'm gonna water this really deeply and I'm gonna let it sit in this cache tray. This pot has a drainage hole. If you have your succulents in a pot, you should always have a drainage hole so that the water does flow through. And I'm gonna let that sit in there and soak in all that water. Not only that it's going into the soil, but it is going into the leaves of these plants. So I'm gonna leave it in this cache tray for a while, at least an hour, if not longer. Once I see that the water in this tray is not going down anymore, and I know this pot and all the plants are not taking on any more water, I will take it out and then let it fully dry out before I do any more watering. So I talked a little bit about knowing if your succulent needs water. If your succulent is getting a little bit squishy, if the stems or the leaves are going dark and squishy, that is a sign of rot. Sometimes you can save a succulent from rot. Remove any rotten, squishy, smelly leaves. Cut the stem as far as you can to remove any rotten parts and let it fully dry out before you go near that succulent. It can survive if you have cut out all the rot and you allow it to callus over again before replanting it. I should also mention that succulents go through dormant periods. Depending on the succulent, it's different times of year. So, for example, if you have aeoniums and they start dropping all their bottom leaves and start squishing up and you're thinking, oh my God, my plant is dead, fear not, your plant is going dormant. Aeoniums in particular go dormant in the summer months. It is their way of conserving water and surviving long periods of heat and drought. Not to worry, give it a few months. Once the cooler, wetter weather arrives, they will go back, open up, and look lush once again. Different plants go dormant at different times of year, so it could be worth looking up your particular plant and seeing what time of year they go dormant. So if your succulent suddenly stops growing and looking full, don't sweat it. It could just be going dormant. And now I can't talk about watering succulents without talking about succulent soil. Since these plants do not want to be overly wet, choosing a soil that has good drainage ability is best. Most garden centers and nurseries will sell cactus and succulent mix soil. This soil is really gritty, it has less organic material than soil for, say, indoor house plants. It usually has added sand, perlite, or volcanic rock. And again, that allows for better drainage and also helps the soil dry out more quickly. If you cannot find a specific cactus mix soil, you can amend other soil with sand or with perlite, vermiculite, other gritty materials to make it better suited for succulents. If you are planting your succulents in the ground, you should avoid clay soil. You can amend your soil by adding cactus mix, and that should help. Clay soil gets too compact, it retains too much water, and it's really hard for these plants to thrive. Finally, let's talk about one of my favorite aspects of succulents, the way they propagate so easily, the way you can make whole new plants from just cuttings and leaves. So just using a cut stem or a cut leaf, you can create a whole new plant and have infinite free plants for yourself. So all you really need to do, generally, if you have a succulent, cut a stem, pretend this was potted out, and then stick it in the soil and you'll have a whole new plant. That cut stem will start to root and grow. The same thing can be done with leaves. You can take the leaves, full, whole succulent leaves, stick them on the soil. They will start to root and grow whole new plants for most types of succulents. Some succulents do require stems and nodes. Others can be propagated just from leaves alone. So here is a sedum that I cut earlier. I didn't even plant this in soil, and you can see it's already starting to root. And as mentioned, you can take these sedum leaves, lay them on the soil, and they'll grow whole new plants. You can see many examples here of leaves that I had, and I just laid them on the soil and they start to grow whole new plants. And this is one of the reasons I love going to Home Depot and looking on the ground and looking to see if any leaves have dropped, because you can often just bring them home, stick them on soil, and they will start to grow whole new plants. Now I should say, as mentioned before, succulents can rot. So if you are doing this, you might want to leave it a day or two to let that wound callus over before putting it in soil. This soil is dry and the weather here where I am is very dry. So I know I'm not at any risk of that rotting, but I won't want to water that plant until I know that that has fully calloused over or has grown roots. Some succulents like this string of bananas do require a stem or a node. You can't propagate from just the leaf. You do need the stem. You can actually see this has got aerial roots growing out where this wants to root itself elsewhere, as this is a hanging plant, but it's also works as a ground cover. So it's looking to grow more plants. So I could just simply cut this, replant it, and I'll have a whole new string of bananas. Some succulents, such as these agaves, they will also grow pups. Same goes with these haworthia. So whole new plants will just start growing out of the base of these plants, and you can pull them off and replant them and have whole new plants. And that also goes into the fact that these plants are really resilient. This is a great example. This is a plant I had found a few broken stems like this on the ground at a local nursery. They said it was okay if I took them home. I planted them up. They started growing and made this really cool succulent. And then it fell over and this part broke off. Am I worried? No, because this can quite simply be placed into the soil, and what's really cool is this stem will also most likely grow new little plants. So if you break your succulents, don't even worry about it. Don't throw them away. Put them on soil. They'll grow whole new plants. And this ability to propagate from just stems is one of the reasons it's so easy to make really cute succulent arrangements like this, because I just did this the other day. All you need is one little cutting to pop in the soil and they will start to grow. So you can make very cute succulent arrangements very easily without the need to have fully rooted plants. So that is a lot, but hopefully it has been helpful on your succulent journey. If you have any questions or comments, please do put them below. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and of course subscribe. One of the questions I constantly get is how to water succulents. So we're going to cover that in this video. For those of you familiar with this channel, you'll know that I love succulents. They're some of my favorite plants to grow and to propagate. And sometimes they're called easy care plants, but I think that is a bit of a misnomer because there is a little bit of an art to growing succulents. When they are happy, they can be some of those satisfying plants with the range of color and texture that they can give you, but they can be a little bit fussy, and different succulents have different needs. And while succulents are considered drought tolerant plants, it can be hard to know exactly when to water them and how much to water them, because the danger, of course, is if you overwater them, they are susceptible to rot. Generally, when you are caring for succulents, you're going to want to keep the soil dry. They like it dry. Their leaves are full of moisture. That's what makes them drought tolerant, and they can handle long bouts of dryness. For me, I always think of a plant, how does that plant behave in nature when there's no human intervention? So succulents are used to living in dry, arid, desert-like conditions, so they have these built-in moisture keepers in their leaves and in their stems. However, low water doesn't mean no water. So while these plants are designed to tolerate very low water or seasons of drought, when you do water them, you want to give them a very good soak. So the first thing you're going to do is check your soil. The soil should be fully dry before you even consider watering your succulents. Sometimes it's hard to check if the soil is completely dry. I usually like to stick my finger in. Some people use a moisture meter. I don't find them super reliable. If there is any moisture, leave it. They don't need to be watered. The second step is not only check the soil, but also check the plant. Is the plant showing signs of thirst? You'll start to be able to notice the difference. So these plants are nice and thick. There's no wrinkling. They're not looking thirsty. This is a little Crassula jade plant. There's a little bit of wrinkling on this leaf, but I just recently watered this plant. But compare that to, say, this one, where there's a lot more wrinkling. Here's another type of Crassula. This wrinkling is the water being used from the plant to sustain it. So it's starting to drain its water reserves to stay alive. Here's another good example of this very little dry pot. See those leaves? They're almost ready to fall off. They are so dry. So this plant needs a really good soak. They also tend to lose their color when they're thirsty. So this is a Aeonium kiwi. It's looking a little bit dull. The leaves are getting very dry, falling off like that. So this is what it would look like if it was full of water. Do you see the difference in the color? It's lost the brightness. It's looking a little bit dull. So if I give this one a very good soaking, it should return to this. Here's another arrangement that has been ignored for a while. You'll see it's losing lots of leaves. So as you can see how wrinkled those bottom leaves look. The top isn't too bad. It's just doing a good job of going into survival mode and saving that water. This is the same plant. I gave this one was looking the same. I gave it a really good soak. So here's the difference in the leaves. Full of water, nice and shriveled up. So that's the difference there. So let's water some of these, shall we? So I'm here picking out the ones that are looking particularly thirsty. They haven't been watered in a while. I can see they're very dry. The leaves are a little bit shriveled. And I'm gonna put them in this drip tray. And hopefully they should all fit. There we go. And I'm gonna use an actual watering can to make sure I'm really getting in there. I'm gonna fill that all the way up. Fill that all the way up. This one has some like decorative moss on top, but I'm making sure that's nice and filled up. Same for this. I could also wouldn't hurt to clean up some of those dried up dead leaves out of there. And really this one probably could do with a trim and a repot, but for now I'm gonna leave it. I think it'll start to come back to life. And you'll notice it kind of bubbling away. It's soaking through. Since these all have drainage, the water is going through. And then I'm gonna give it more water. I really wanna soak these. Okay, and I'm gonna leave them now to let all of that moisture soak in and let those plants come back to life. Overwatering is just as bad for your succulents as is underwatering. And the reason for this is that they have very sensitive, very small roots that can be susceptible to rot. And if they do get rot in their roots or their stems, they will just sort of start to disintegrate. The leaves will fall off, they'll get squishy. It's not a good way for them to go. The container that you keep your succulents in is also really important. It is very important to have drainage holes for your succulents. I also like terracotta pots because they are permeable, they wick the water away. So it means after these have had a nice good soak, they are not sitting in soggy, wet soil. The roots are getting lots of air, and that's really important for them to prevent rot. So while it's important to talk about the amount of water and how to water and the type of pot that your succulent is in, if it's in any pot at all, it's also really important to talk about the soil that your succulent is in, because that is part of the watering process. One way to prevent rot is to use a soil that is specially formulated for cactus or succulents, as you see here. Cactus are kind of technically a form of succulent. So when you take a look at this soil, you'll see it's very loose. It's very gritty. This one in particular has a lot of sand added. I believe there's perlite and lava rock. Not as much organic material as, say, like an indoor tropical potting mix. Soil that succulents definitely do not like is clay. This is my garden. We have a lot of clay soil. So if I'm going to be planting my succulents into the soil, I make sure and supplement this clay with the cactus mix. For example, this whole area, this is outdoors. You can kind of see there is some clay back behind, but I mostly added all cactus mix here before putting these succulents in. And the reason that's important is that this soil, it kind of lets the moisture pass through it. It'll stay a little bit moist, but it won't lock in or hold the moisture. Clay soil stays soggy, stays wet, it gets very hard, and that is like a death knell for succulent type plants. They want the water to pass through. I also want to mention what I call my dry propagation tray. This is where if I find a succulent leaf that I want to propagate, I throw it into this tray until I either find space for it or until it starts to grow. Oh, there you go, a little baby succulent. I'm often asked, do I water this? Do I mist it? No, I absolutely do not. This stays completely dry. This does not get watered at all. I just keep things in here. They will start to grow aerial roots because they are looking for moisture, and it will encourage them to start growing little pups. I do not add any moisture to this, as I do find it encourages pests. It looks like I've got a little bit of a pest issue that I need to address anyway, but when you add any sort of moisture in this situation, it's more likely that things will rot or it'll attract things like mealybugs. Once those little leaf propagations have been planted and have grown roots, that's when I water them. And this I will either water or I might mist it just because they're sort of delicately in there, but I don't generally mist plants. So I might mist them just to prevent them from coming up out of the soil, but once they get a little bit bigger, say to the size of this, you'll see these are well rooted in here. These I don't mist, these I use a normal shower hose head. My final note is about succulent dormancy. Some succulents, such as these aeoniums, for example, they go dormant here in the summertime in California. You'll notice they'll drop a lot of their lower leaves. They'll start to curl up and retain their moisture. It's a protective measure for surviving drought. It doesn't mean your succulent is dying or dead. It just means it's going through seasons. It's a little bit like a deciduous tree losing its leaves. I've got a good example of this here in my front yard. It is July right now. These aeoniums are on drip irrigation. They are protected from a lot of the direct sunlight. We've got some bird of paradise trees here, so they're a little bit out of the direct sunlight. While these aeoniums, they are also on a little bit of irrigation, but they get a lot more direct sunlight. You'll notice they have dropped a lot of leaves. They're kind of shriveled up a little bit. So these plants are basically doing whatever they can to just survive the hot July summer. If your succulent has gone dormant, this is not something to worry about. You don't want to overwater it as it is still susceptible to rot. Just monitor the soil. When the soil is fully dry, give it a water then, and just be patient. It's just going through seasons and it will come back. It is also worth looking up your specific succulent, as say aeoniums go dormant in the summertime, but there are other succulents that go dormant in the winter. Again, it's just different seasons for different plants. Hopefully this has been helpful for your succulent care. If you have any questions, please be sure and put them in the comments. I'm happy to help out where I can. And don't forget to follow me on my other social media channels. I'm on TikTok and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe. In this video, I'm going to share my succulent care tips, as well as talk about the top 5 mistakes most people make when caring for succulents and how to avoid them. Succulents are are really beautiful plants that can be really easy care when you know how to take care of them. However, it's really easy to make mistakes when caring for succulents because their care is a little bit different to the average houseplant. Now, I'm using succulent as a general term for really drought-tolerant plants such as echeverias or haworthias, but it can refer to a lot of different types of plants. Any plant really that retains moisture in their leaves and their stems and are really drought-tolerant. Now, drought-tolerant should also give you a clue to succulent care. And while they can be really easy care plants, there are a few mistakes that some people make. And once there's a cat showing off in the background of the video. While succulents can be really easy care plants, there's a couple of mistakes that people often make that can be easily avoided when you know what to do. Mistake number one, overwatering. Succulents, as mentioned, are drought-tolerant plants. They don't require a lot of water. And being very moisture retentive, when they have too much water, they tend to get root rot, leaf rot, or stem rot. If you find that your succulent leaves are getting a little mushy, if the stem looks mushy, if the leaves are going a bit yellow, check the soil and make sure it's not overly wet. One mistake people make with any plant care is having like a regular routine of watering and just putting a date on the calendar and saying, oh, I water once a week, once a day, once a month. Really, you should be going by the soil of your plant. Check the soil. If the soil is moist, if it's very moist, do not water that plant. Let the soil completely dry out before you water again, and that should help avoid overwatering these plants. They can be really sensitive to overwatering and start to rot if they're sitting in standing water. If you find that you have a succulent that is suffering from rot, if the stem is getting a little bit squishy or the leaves, my advice is to clip that succulent, let it completely callus over and dry before replanting in dry soil. As long as you have removed the rot from the stem or taken the leaves off from the rotted stem, it should be able to re-root and propagate itself, and you can save that plant. Mistake number two is related to watering. You're going to want to make sure that your succulents are planted in the correct soil. You want to make sure that your succulents are in a really nice, well-draining soil. You can often purchase ready-made succulent type soil, which is great. It usually has added sand, perlite, vermiculite, less organic material. You want to make sure that the soil you use doesn't retain too much water, that allows really good drainage for the water to flow past the roots. You want to make sure your plants aren't sitting in a really soggy, mushy soil. Related to that is also if your succulents are in a pot, that it has a drainage hole. Now, not all pots have drainage holes, such as this decorative pot, and that's why I use a cache pot. You can see I actually just recently watered this, but there are drainage holes in this. And that way I can be sure that the water is going to completely drain out and it's not going to cause the rot that you can get from overwatering. Mistake number three is underwatering or misting your succulents. I know that sounds contradictory since I just said overwatering is a huge mistake, but underwatering your succulents or using a mister to water them is really bad for them. These are plants that do not like to be in a humid environment. They don't like moisture attached to their leaves. They can often get fungal issues from water that stays on their leaves, such as powdery mildew, and even drought-tolerant plants need a good watering. So my recommendation with succulents is not to mist, but to make sure that once your soil has completely dried out and drained, you give them a good, deep watering. Make sure that soil gets fully saturated, but is allowed to drain off. So if you don't water them enough, they can start to get kind of wrinkled looking leaves. It's very common. I have a lot of succulents that are planted in the ground. It's very common in the summertime for them to lose their leaves and go dormant and go a little bit wrinkly. They can really survive long periods of time without watering, and that's why it's safer to leave the watering times longer than too soon. However, they do want that really good soaking so that they can retain the water back into their leaves, and that's how they survive droughts, and that's what makes them succulents. I often think of plant care as how does this plant survive in the wild? So a lot of these succulents, we're here in California, and this is a perfect example. It's winter here. We've just had a huge atmospheric river come through, several days of heavy rain, and then we won't have rain for months. And my succulents are green, they're lush, they've gotten that water that will sustain them for the next couple of months, and then they're good and they don't need to be watered again. For my succulents that are in my garden, the in-ground succulents, we have a drip irrigation system. We turn it off in the winter because we get the rains, and then in the summertime, we do maybe once or twice a week, a couple of minutes of watering. In the winter, we turn the drip irrigation off because it is our wet season and we get natural rain and even mist in the mornings. And in the summertime, when it is completely dry, that's when we turn the drip irrigation on. The water doesn't spray onto the leaves. It goes directly dripped into the soil for a few minutes, a couple of times a week, and that is enough to sustain my plants. Succulent mistake number 4, not enough light. Succulents need very bright, indirect light to be happiest, and it is quite tough to have succulents as indoor plants. I don't have any of my succulents indoor because I just cannot produce enough light to keep them happy. Succulents are going to want 6 to 7 hours of very bright, indirect sunlight every day. And when I say indirect, that's because succulents can get sunburned with too much direct sunlight. So you have to sort of ease them into direct sunlight. They can do quite well with direct sunlight, and a lot of them, if they're used to it, can be quite happy with very bright direct sunlight. These echeverias, for example, I have them here on my patio. It gets almost direct sunlight with they're underneath a pergola and they get very bright light out here, and these succulents are very happy here. I have some in my garden that have gotten quite used to really bright, really direct sunlight. A lot of times those succulents will turn a darker reddish color or brighter color. That is succulents' way of producing a little bit of like a sunscreen for themselves. When they get a little bit stressed, they do tend to go more orange, red when they're in direct sunlight. Some succulents are more sensitive than others, so succulents that I know that will turn that dark red, they're a little bit safer to be in that really hot direct sunlight, but something that's a little bit more tends to be on the green side, I'm going to keep that a little bit more indirect sunlight. Now, you can absolutely keep succulents indoors if they're in a really bright, sunny window, whether that is south or east or west facing. Of course, you can also use grow lights. And one big indication that your succulents aren't getting enough light is when they start to get what's called leggy. The stems start to grow long, and there's a lot of space in between each leaf. So all of these succulents get a lot of pretty bright direct light, so you'll see the leaves are pretty tight and compact together. But if you get a succulent that is sort of on the pale side, the green side, the color is a big indicator as well, and there's a lot of space in between each leaf, that succulent is stretching, looking for the sun, and that succulent needs more light. So if you want to keep happy succulents, make sure you keep them in a very bright location at least 6 to 8 hours a day. My final tip for this video, tip number 5, is making sure you keep your succulents in good temperature conditions. Succulents prefer being in conditions between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so they are warm weather plants. They do prefer the kind of cooler nights and warmer days, and they can certainly adjust to hotter conditions or cooler conditions. But really, when you get in the like 100 degrees temperatures, hotter than that, they can sunburn and almost like cook internally. I've had that happen to some of my plants when we've had a heat wave. If you are in a location that gets over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to want to make sure you move your succulents into a more sheltered position, whether you use shade cloths or bring them indoors or put them in the shade. You want to protect them from that very, very intense hot sun that can really do a lot of damage to them. And equally, if you're going to be in a place that is going to get frosty or 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, you're going to want to move them into a warmer, more sheltered location, bring them indoors into a greenhouse, somewhere to make sure that they don't freeze. So they're full of moisture. That's what makes them succulents. Their leaves are full of moisture, and if it gets below freezing, the water inside their leaves will freeze and that will kill the plant. Some succulents, such as hens and chicks, their leaves are a bit thinner. They are a little bit more frost resistant. They can happily stay in more freezing conditions, but for the most part, they are warm weather plants. Another question I get asked sometimes, I do a lot of videos about propagating succulents. You'll notice I have some little cuttings here and leaves. One of the joys of succulents is that they propagate from cuttings so easily. I have made an entire channel all about propagating plants for free, and I do get a lot of questions from people who have taken leaves or cuttings and they're not rooting and they don't know why. And a lot of times it's that they need the warmth. They need that warmth to propagate. Succulents do go dormant. Their dormancy season is a lot different to other plants. You know, a traditional tree, deciduous tree, for example, loses its leaves in the winter, and that's when it goes dormant. Succulents often do the opposite. Aeoniums, for example, they go dormant in the summer. They lose all their leaves, they get pretty dry, they kind of close in on themselves. They're not dead, they're just dormant, and they're not going to propagate at that time because it's too hot, it's too dry. They come back in what I would call the California winter time, you know, kind of between the 50 and 60 degree range. That's when they're going to propagate, but they really do need warmth and indirect light to propagate. So bear that in mind if you're trying to propagate succulents and it's not working. Just look at your light, your heat, and your water conditions. I hope this video has been helpful for those of you that are just starting your succulent journey, or if you're someone who has a lot of succulents and you're just wondering what is going on. Hopefully this video has been helpful. I do have a lot of succulent care videos, whether it's about propagation, watering, or specific types of succulents from echeverias, aeoniums, and jade plants, so be sure and check out the rest of my channel. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and don't forget you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. If you've ever wondered how to take a succulent leaf like this and propagate it into something like this, keep watching. And even better when you can get it for free. Friday afternoon. I'm just about to head into the grocery store to pick up a few things for dinner. And one thing about my grocery store, it's in a kind of a strip mall that are pretty common here in California where I live. And there's some kind of drought tolerant landscaping as part of the strip mall. One of which is a kind of a bench planter next to some of the shops that is full of ghosty succulents. And this is a spot I always go and I check, because being part of a bench, a lot of times people sit on these succulents and the leaves fall off. So it's always full of broken leaves, and no one is keeping those leaves to save for themselves. I've even talked to the shop owners. There's a pet shop right next to the bench, and I've asked them if they sort of maintain it and if they mind if I take the broken leaves, and they looked at me sort of incredulously, like, why would they care? So I often go and check to see if there's any broken leaves. So let's go and see if there's anything there today. Here is the planter in question. You see it's full of little ghosty plants. It is looking pretty tidy. There isn't a lot of broken things, but there are a few broken leaves. You'll notice, and I want to emphasize this, I am not breaking leaves. I am simply looking for leaves that are already broken. If you're breaking something, that is completely different. Even look, oh, if you take a look underneath, there's a leaf that has already started growing a little pup. So in addition to my shopping, all of these, and these can easily be propagated into new succulents. I am in no doubt that some people are going to go and say in the comments that this is stealing. That is totally your opinion. We can agree to disagree. As I mentioned, I did talk to the shop owners. They certainly did not mind me picking up a few broken leaves. In fact, I think they almost saw it as I was helping clean up the place. And as mentioned, this is a sort of a strip mall, so even though I suppose technically it's like private property, because I'm sure there's some company that owned the place, it is a sort of public walkway. It's not a private garden that someone is maintaining and owning those plants. It is sort of a public space. Again, I'm sure this will upset some people, but I don't believe that there's anything wrong with this practice. I should also mention, if you don't have your own shopping center where it's easy to find these leaves, but you do have your own succulents, this is how easy it is to turn them into more succulent. If you have a succulent like this, you can see it's grown a lot of leaves, and instead of having this look with all these leaves, and you just want to keep the rosette, you can very simply take that leaf kind of with a strong grip and give it a twist, and it should come off like that without much damage. This is what you want, that kind of nice little dimpling. You don't want a broken, wet leaf, but something like this is perfect to propagate in the methods that I'm about to show you. And this is certainly one way to get a lot of new succulents for yourself when you have some to work with. Coming back to the succulents that I found at my shopping center, here are some of my methods for propagating them into new plants. It's now Sunday. I found these on a Friday afternoon and just left them out here in my outdoor propagation station in the shade, I must point out. So now my next step is to choose a method of propagation to get them to grow into full-on plants. As you can see, this one, well, the work is already done for us. It already started growing, and it looks like this one as well has a little pep already growing. This one does not look so good. I think I'm just gonna throw this away because this has already got some signs of rot. It's shriveled up. Usually the types of leaves that you want to choose for propagation are more full, thick, healthy. They have a little dimple where they were connected to the plant, and they don't have really signs of rot. That's not to say that something with damage won't propagate. It's just not as likely. And a lot of times people say that they have trouble propagating, so I also feel like I should mention that this is a numbers game, that not everything is going to propagate. You do have to be prepared that you might have some failures. Most succulents, not all, but a lot of succulents are pretty cool plants in the sense that they can propagate themselves just from a dropped leaf. And this is pretty common, that they drop leaves on their own and they start to grow little pups. Eventually, these pups will root. These pups use the water and nutrition that is in these kind of chunky succulent leaves to sustain them. Eventually, they'll grow roots, and they'll start to get their sustenance from the soil in the roots, and the leaf will shrivel up, and they will become their own little plant. But I know some people find it quite difficult to get their propagations to work. So hopefully there will be some method here that will help get some plants for you from your succulent leaves. These are what's known as ghost succulents. I believe that's probably from their kind of creamy coloring that they have on top. They go very kind of greenish when left in the shade. They'll turn more orangey pink if left in the sunlight. Their scientific name, I know I'm going to murder this, I believe it's Graptopetalatum paraguayens. Apologies to any botanists out there. I know that I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly. But they are a very easy succulent to propagate from leaf. One of the main things about propagating succulent leaves is they should never be left in direct sunlight. That is just a recipe for disaster. They will get sunburned, they will shrivel up. A lot of times if you leave them in the sun, they'll kind of turn black and hard like this. It's just not good. they should be left in the shade, or as some of us like to call it, bright indirect light. So I'm outdoors, you can see there's some very bright light over there. I leave them here in the shade. We are in Southern California. It is August, so today is really quite hot. If you put these in direct sunlight, they would cook. But it is still very warm. While succulents are very resilient, most of them cannot withstand heavy frost. If you're in an area that gets colder in the night, you might want to do this indoors. You just want to make sure there's no frost, but also not too much heat. You want a kind of a happy medium. So my first method I'm going to share is quite simply the soil method. And this is when you just place the leaves upright on a bit of soil. I have a little bit of loamy soil. This is in a little tiny nursery pot. There is drainage. That is important. And I'm going to use 2 leaves because this one has already sprouted a pup. I'm going to just leave it, and you just leave it there. You don't want to bury the leaves. I have seen some people do this kind of thing. You don't want to do that. You literally lay it on the leaf flat. The roots will start to come out, and the pup will, similar to this one, they will just start to move upright. It doesn't really matter which way you put it. If you put it this way or this way, the plant should be able to figure out roots go down, pup goes up. I just usually put them this way as just a habit. It certainly doesn't have to be like that. And another thing to mention is if you find a leaf like this that has a pup already on it, as long as that leaf is not completely dry, keep the leaf on there. That leaf is sustaining this pup. It's giving it its moisture and nutrients ahead of it growing roots and getting the nutrients and moisture from the soil. Once you have your leaves in soil, you can give them a little bit of a spray to encourage rooting. You don't have to. I don't always, but misting is a good method once they're on soil, so long, again, as you have drainage. You don't want them to be sitting in this wetness. You're going to want to make sure that that kind of drains through. This is making me a little nervous because it is a bit damp, but that will eventually dry up. So that is one way to encourage rooting. The second method I'm going to talk about is water propagation. Now, the risk here, of course, with any water propagation of any kind of plant is water propagations are more susceptible to rot. And as we know, succulents are very susceptible to rot. There are a few methods to make this work a little bit better, and I will show you what I usually would do in this situation. I've got this little bud vase. I've filled the water up pretty high. And obviously I don't want to just stick this in here. You know, you could probably rest it like that. Again, I feel like that is a recipe for disaster. So what I'm going to use is I have some plastic wrap. I am going to place it over this vase, get it nice and tight. Like so, and then I'm going to kind of cut a little hole so that these are resting just above the water. I've got this little snipper. I'm just gonna make the tiniest cut, and you can see there might be a little bit too much water in there because there is. So made a little small cut. I'm gonna take my leaf. Now, looking at this, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to take these leaves. These were obviously a bud that got knocked off. I don't think they're going to grow into a bud. I think I'm better off twisting and making them into their own propagations. Let's see. I'm going to twist them very carefully off. I don't want to cause any damage. There we go. So I'm going to take my leaf, I'm going to find that little hole that I created, and I'm going to kind of stick it through. Now, it's currently touching the water. I don't really want it to do that, so I'm going to lift it up, and I don't know if you can see, it is sort of touching the water a little bit, but not much. In fact, I think I'm gonna drain a small bit of the water so that it's just moist in there. I don't really want that to be touching the water. Okay, so I emptied some of the water out, so it's not actually touching the water. If it was more like that, you can see it touches the water there. It's not touching the water. What will happen is it will start to grow roots, and the roots will go into the water, but the leaf itself is not in the water. And that is the key to helping prevent rot in this situation. So I'm gonna actually put 3 leaves in this method. Like I said, there's always the probability that things won't work. So the more you put into propagation, the more likely you are to have success. So we're gonna set those aside over here where I have other propagations. Like I said, it's warm, it is in the shade, and I believe those will start to root. Another way to propagate succulents, and possibly my favorite way, is to do absolutely nothing at all. Let me show you. If you have a warm, shady spot, or even indoors on a windowsill, some place that's dry, you can just leave a leaf like this alone. You can see this one's already starting to grow. You could just leave this leaf alone and it will start to propagate as well. I'm gonna put a couple more leaves on here to show you. We'll have a look and see if that works. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know this is what I call my dry propagation tray. This is a total mess because I need to go through it and check the health of some of these. But when I have a ton of leaves, like these ones I literally just pulled off earlier in the video, and I don't have enough room to put them in a pot, or I don't have enough propagation vessels, I'll just leave them here. And a lot of times they will just start to grow. It doesn't always work, but that's the same for any method. So this is just another method, especially if you're in a climate that is dry and warm and you have some shade. This is a great option for people like myself who don't have a lot of time, but you still want to grow some plants for free. And now my final method for propagation is known as the paper towel method. Personally, I don't usually use this method as I find it can take a lot of work, but you quite simply find some kind of a tray, you get a paper towel and you soak it. This is just tap water. You get that towel nice and wet, and once it's soaked through, you very simply place your leaves with the kind of tip side onto the paper towel. They will, similar to the soil method or the water method, they will eventually start to root and grow little succulent pups. Why do I not use this method that much? Personally, I am just a little bit lazy. I'm a little bit more of a sit back plant parent. The dry method is more my style. I find it works just as effectively, but I know some people really like this method. It makes you forces you to pay attention to your plants. So you'll just have to make sure that this paper towel stays moist in order to encourage that root growth. If that paper towel dries after they've grown roots, I've found it does kind of stunt the growth. So that is why you do want to keep that paper towel moist. Okay, so I have my 4 methods of propagation going here, and we will check back in on them and see how they do. See if one method works better than others. It's not very scientific because all these leaves are slightly different, but we'll check it out and see how it goes.
1 week later.
It's been about a week, so let's check in on our propagations. So the soil propagations, you'll remember that one already had a little pup growing out of it. It is definitely gotten bigger. Let's see if it's rooted. Yeah, I can't. Ooh. So it has little tiny roots kind of coming out. So that is a good sign. And place that back in there. The other leaf, no real progress there. I have this soil fairly dry, so I might give that a quick little spray. Here are the leaves that were put on the damp paper towel. It looks like one has got a little pup coming. Little tiny, that little pink stuff, those are the roots. Let's see if any other progress has been made. I just dampened this. No other progress. These leaves are a little bit damaged. I turned this upside down because I didn't want this damage to become rot. That's funny. It's like a little, what would have been a pup. And like I said, this is not, propagation is not 100% guaranteed, which is why the more you try, the more likely you are to have success. Onto our dry propagations. You can ignore these. These are from other plants. I just kind of put them in the same bowl. This tiny one, no progress. Look at that. I don't believe that had a little pup before. I'll have to go and double check, but, or if it did, it had a small one. So there's some roots and a pup growing there. And this tiny one, nothing happening there. Looks like a little bit damaged, so we might not see any growth from that one. Here are the water propagations. Let's take a look. Okay, there's definitely something going on here. No roots or no buds yet, but definitely there's some kind of growth happening in all three of them. Okay, so I'm gonna put them back in. Set them aside.
2 weeks later.
It's time to check back in on the propagations. Full disclosure, I have been away from home, so I have not been keeping on top of these at all, especially the paper towel propagations. That paper towel is supposed to remain wet. I would dampen it maybe once a week. It's been a while, but let's have a look and see what we're working with. So here's our dry propagations. These 3 leaves were just set here and ignored. There's been no water, no misting. It's been pretty hot and dry here. And as you can see, this one might have already had a little pup growing. I can't remember. There's a pup, and these 2 little tiny ones have roots growing. The soil propagation, this one, look at that. I mean, it's not a leaf anymore, it's a full-blown plant. Look, it hasn't even gone into the soil, but it's obviously looking to go into the soil, and its mother leaf is dried up. The other leaf, I'll move this out of the way so we can see. The other leaf does have roots going into the soil, and there is a little pup growing. So that one is a success. Here's the paper towel. I just wet it. Like I said, I have not really been here much to keep an eye on it. Yet we still have growth on all of them. Even this one that is a little bit damaged. You can see there's like a teeny tiny little pup growing there. So that method definitely works. It might have been even more successful had I kept that paper towel damp, but it works even if you forget about it. And then finally, we have our water propagation. So I can already see there's definitely some roots going on here. Oh, they're reaching down to the water. Okay, let's just take this off and see how they look. Okay, so with the water propagations, there are definitely roots on 2 of them. One looks like it may be a fail. There's not much going on there. And are there little pups there? So interestingly, there aren't little pups, but there's like little growths that maybe are going to turn into pups. But it's not the same kind of look as that. You can see some definitive little leaves on that one, whereas these just like kind of, sorry, my camera doesn't focus super close up, but there's definitely growths, but they're not leafy growths. So what's the takeaway here? I think for sure there is no surefire right or wrong way to propagate succulents from leaves. I think it's whatever method you're the most comfortable with. This certainly wasn't a scientific experiment. I know my favorite ways are the soil and just set it and forget it method, just because keeping a paper towel damp, it's a little bit of maintenance there. It just goes to show how easy it is to go and find succulent leaves for free and get a whole bunch of plants. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments. I'm happy to reply and answer where I can. Also, don't forget, I'm on other social media channels, so don't forget to check me out on Instagram and TikTok. And of course, subscribe. Hello and welcome to the first in a series I'm going to call What's Wrong with My Succulent. If you follow me on TikTok, you may have seen some videos similar to this, but I figure with YouTube, we can take a little bit more time to go a little bit more in depth about succulents and succulent care and how to get the most out of your succulents. So for the first in this series, I'm going to talk about leggy succulents. And what do I mean by leggy? Look how long and stretched this succulent is. This is a ghosty. I believe it's also called a Graptopelatum paraguayans. I am not a botanist, so apologies for completely ruining that pronunciation. But this succulent has grown very, very long. You can see it started as a cutting and it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And, you know, some people like this, but this is not supposed to be a trailing succulent. It's really supposed to be a little bit tighter and smaller and not stretched out and leggy like this. So if you're finding that your succulents are looking like this, simple answer, they are not getting enough light. They are stretching in the hopes that they can find some more light. You know, it makes sense if a plant is planted behind a bush, another plant, behind a rock, somewhere where it's not getting that much light, it's going to stretch to try and find sunlight. Succulents love bright light. Not always direct light, they can get sunburn, but bright, at least indirect light. You can put succulents in direct sunlight, but you have to kind of ease them into that. If I moved this plant into bright, direct sunshine, it will get sunburned, all the leaves will turn black and shrivel up. And that won't be good, but you can kind of ease a plant into bright sunshine. These ghosties in particular, when they're not getting a lot of bright sunlight, they turn this kind of pale green color and they stretch really, really long. I'll show you another example of the same plant that is getting a lot of direct sunshine. Over here, I have a very sunny corner of my garden, and would you believe this is the same plant as this. These are also ghosties, but you'll notice the leaves are much tighter and they're much closer together. There's no long stretching. It's not like a trailing plant. It's more like the classic succulent rosette. And also notice the color. It is almost, you know, orangey yellow. And that is because these sit in direct sunshine for several hours a day. Same plant, different location. So this poor ghosty was in a different part of my yard that was very shaded, never got any direct sunshine, and even the indirect light was not that bright. One of the best things about succulents is that even though if you do find your succulents in this state, it's actually a really easy fix and you will end up getting lots of new plants out of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop this fairly close because that little rosette can be set elsewhere. I'm gonna remove these bottom leaves and I'm gonna also keep those. I am gonna chop this up in a couple of places. I'm gonna chop it there, chop it up here, chop it here. I could chop that even smaller if I wanted. But all of these stems can then be replanted, these leaves removed, the bottom leaves, and these will propagate and make new babies, these will propagate and make tons of new babies. I'll show you some examples of what they will eventually turn into. So when you remove a succulent leaf like this and you get the entire leaf, it will start to grow a little baby plant from the bottom here. I'll show you. Here's a tray of leaves that I've set aside. This is another ghosty. Now look at that. This is in bright, indirect light. It's dry. And I've just set these aside because I don't have room to plant them, but they will start to grow little pups. If you have the room and the time, you could plant those leaves directly on soil like this, and they will start to root and grow babies, much like these. These are the same type of plants. You'll see there's where the leaf came from. You never detach the leaf before it's ready. It will eventually dry up, and you can see there's some dead leaves there. It will eventually dry up and fall off on its own, but those leaves provide all the kind of water and nutrients that these new baby plants have until they're ready and they have their own roots, and then the leaf will just eventually dry up and fall off. And then you may be wondering why I kept the stems. Well, the stems can also equally be put into soil like this, and they will start to grow baby plants out of the stems. I like to call this my garden of the dead. They really look like dead plants, but they will start to grow off and shoot off new baby plants. These are not the exact same type of plants, but you get the idea. This is the same method for growing new pups. So everything in here are plants that I grew from finding little leaf cuttings or stem cuttings of other plants, which is why I like to call this channel Free Plants Forever, because once you get your method down, you can really make lots and lots of free plants forever out of a lot of your existing plants. Here's another good example of Garden of the Dead. It's not pretty, but look at all those plants that are growing out of those dead stems. So eventually what I will be able to do is pull off these pups from this stem and plant them up as their own separate plants. There you go. You see that can be taken from there. All of these are growing new baby plants out of these stems that pretty much were headed for the compost pile. So here's what I'm left with after that plant. I will plant all of these stems. I might keep some of the leaves on there, might not need to. Like this one, I didn't keep any leaves on there. There were no leaves on there. I will just plant that straight up. These leaves I will set aside. They'll start to sprout roots and new little buds. And then this little rosette, I'll just plant that up, possibly in a pot. It looks great. So hopefully that's been helpful on your free plant journey and your plant parent journey. Succulents, some people say they're tricky. You know, my advice is always bright light, not that much water, and feel free to chop them up. They're really resilient once you get the hang of it. Thank you so much for watching. I plan on doing a bunch more of this series. We always appreciate it when you subscribe and check out our other social channels. And best of luck with your succulents and your free plants. Thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to share with you my tips for shopping for plants, how to get the most value for your money, how to get more plants for the same price. So keep watching for my cheap plant shopping hacks. In previous videos, I've discussed going to Home Depot or other large garden centers in order to find leaves or cuttings that you can find on the ground to propagate at home. It's a controversial subject, as some of you may know, but I also wanted to come on here and share different methods for going to places like Home Depot or any nursery or garden center and getting the best value for money. How to shop, what to look for to get more plants for the same amount of money, and then how to care for those plants when you get home. So here are some of my tips. I I start my trips to my local garden center by browsing and seeing what plants are available. These can change weekly depending on the season and the stock available. Where I live, we have a lot of succulents, which are often sold in groups like these. Take a look and count how many succulent heads are available in each pot. These can all be separated into individual plants. So by choosing a pot with 4 or even 5 plants as opposed to 3, you're getting a lot more plants for the same price. Similarly, plants like aloe and agave are known for shooting off pups, or little baby plants. These pups can also be separated into individual plants, again, giving you more plants for the same price. Take a good look at all the different pots available and choose wisely. Don't be afraid to pick them up, poke them around, look under the leaves, and really examine them. Here are some more agave and mangave showing off pups. And another group of agave, I think these are agave perii. One has a large amount of pups. These pups can easily be removed and repotted and will quickly grow to the same size as the mother plant. The same method applies whether you're in a large garden center or just the houseplant section of a grocery store. Even little plants will shoot off pups, which can be separated into more plants, like this Haworthia. It's not just desert plants either. These colocasia plants are shooting off new pups from what is likely a lot of corms produced by the plant. When repotted, these pups and corms can be replanted to create more plants. Other houseplants, such as Sansevieria, also produce pups that can be removed and replanted. This pot in particular has 2 pups in addition to the mother plant, compared to the plant beside it, which is just one single plant. Even the ever-popular fiddle-leaf fig can have offshoots, like many ficus, so look for them when purchasing. It could either be left as is for a fuller-looking plant or chopped and repropagated, which will not only produce a completely new plant, but will encourage new branch growth from the original tree. This pot in particular has 3 mature growths and even 1 small baby branch. It's not just plants either. Some stores will offer a deep discount for ripped bags of soil or rock. Just don't rip them yourself. My favorite spot, though, is the clearance section. I have found some amazing deals here, especially if you have the time and inclination for a plant rescue. Today's deal are these $1 gallon pots of succulents. So these were my really big deal of the day plants. I got a bunch of succulents in the clearance section for $1. Campfire plant. These are Echeveria allegra. Look, normal price. $10, got it for 1, but not only that, even if they were $10, it'd be pretty good because you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4 plants in that one, and this one, even more. From what I can see, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plants in this. So even if you're paying full price, right, you got 6 plants, that's $1.60 for each of these plants. But then for me, at the clearance rate, I'm basically getting those for 16 cents each. And I mean, okay, technically it's not a free plant, but it's as close to free as you can get. So what do we do with these plants? How do we break them apart into multiple plants? I mean, obviously I can just pull these out of the pot and plant them as is with one big plant here. But I want to take advantage of all of these plants. So I'll show you what I'm going to do to take these apart. Okay, so here is the plant as I've pulled it out. The first thing you're going to do is just kind of gently massage the soil away. I can see there's some like kind of nice healthy roots in there, and even though succulents do not require roots for planting, I am planning on putting these in a very sunny spot in the garden, so I think having the roots there will make them a little bit more hardy. And as you see, as I'm going through this, there's a lot of leaf detritus I'm gonna get rid of. So I'm really just carefully pulling these apart. As you massage it, you'll start to notice where the kind of little pups are coming out. The reason this plant has so many plants on it is it's kind of doing its succulent thing. And as we get in here, we can have a little bit of a better look. As the soil and the dead leaves are taken out, you can start to see how this plant is put together, how it's grown. There's even like some little tiny new pups even coming out, very new ones. So I'm just gonna gently massage it and start kind of taking them apart from each other. There is one big mama plant that they all came from. And they're all pups of that plant. I may need to go in and actually use clippers to take it apart. I don't know if you can see that. You can start to see where there we go, look. And that has just come off. So we've got a nice big succulent floret. Because it was so tightly in there, it got a little bit squashed and misshapen. Now that we've separated this will start to get a really nice shape. Let's see if we can do it with the rest. So this one was a pup. So I did kind of break it off a little bit. You can see where it was attached, but it's got its own roots. So it'll be just fine. And now I want to be real careful because there is a little tiny, tiny baby pup in there. I want it to, oh, I squished it. It happens. That was a pup. It's okay. I got plenty of plants from this, and it will grow. It just goes to show it will grow more plants. So I just took those apart, and these two. So I will show you exactly what we ended up with from this $1 plant. Okay, so here's what we ended up with from that one pot. Here's the mama plant. So we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 echeverias. So not 6 as I had originally thought, but still, I mean, 20 cents for this plant is a lot cheaper than even buying the little mini pots at places like Home Depot. You usually see those for about $3. So we're doing pretty well here. So each of these can be planted individually. So I did manage to keep all of these with roots. However, with succulents like this or aloe or agave pups, which are also really common when you are buying plants with pups, you can very simply use clippers, clip those, and these will regrow their own roots. Like if you can't take apart something with roots, don't sweat it. These will grow as cuttings. One nice advantage of growing things from cuttings as well, if sometimes this is useful, is you can see this is pretty big. If you're going to grow something from a cutting, it's going to use a lot of its energy to regrow new roots and repropagate, and it will take a little bit longer for it to grow too big or to flower, which is a good thing. Sometimes you don't want these to get overgrown. In other cases, sometimes you do want them to grow bigger. So I am looking forward to, so you probably hear the water, I am planning on planting these up into that new section of my garden. So interestingly, this is the other echeveria that came from that clearance section. I thought it had 4 plants, 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like it's got 5. And in under here, 6, 7, 8. So this one, it looked like it had less plants. It's actually got 8 plants in here. So that is 8 plants for $1. And I figure this might be also a good demonstration on how you can just quite simply cut these to get another plant out of this. I'm just gonna let this callus off, remove a lot of the lower leaves, and then you can just pop it into a pot or into the ground and it will regrow. And in some cases, using this cutting method is preferred because, as you can see, this obviously has one big mother plant, and these were all pups coming out. I don't think they're going to detach the same way these did, so the best way to remove them is with the clippers, like that. So in the end, with the second plant, we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a ton of little tiny pups. I'm not going to detach them just yet because they are so small, but a ton more plants. All right, so I have all these lovely little echeverias. I want to plant around it. I think it'll look so pretty. Gonna add some nice loamy soil and stick them in like that. The soil all around so they're nice and snug in there. Here they are, all planted up and separated. I have 5 plants here all together. This is a great example to show you that buying these as a group, whether clearance or not, is much better value than buying them individually. I hope this has been helpful for your plant shopping journey, and I always love to hear your shopping tips and tricks, and just love having conversations with you all. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to check out my other social media channels on Instagram and TikTok, and of course, subscribe and ring the bell. This single succulent can turn into dozens of new plants, and I'm going to show you exactly how. And honestly, it is the easiest way to get free plants. This channel is called Free Plants Forever, and as the title implies, I love to show you guys how to get free plants, and succulents are one of the easiest ways to get free plants. And this single succulent has given me multiple new leaves that, as you can see, are starting to grow roots and eventually will grow new little baby plants. So I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how you can take one succulent and get a ton of new plants from them, and it's really honestly a lot easier than it seems. So how do you do it? How do you get new plants from succulents? There's lots of different plants that you can get propagations from cuttings. We're going to focus on succulents on this video because it is so easy, and I'm going to use some of my favorite and the easiest succulents to propagate as examples. And now there are 3 main areas of succulent propagation that I'm going to focus on in this video. First is rosette cutting, where you cut the rosette of a succulent and you simply place it in the soil. The stem propagation, where you keep the stem of that rosette and it will start to grow new plants. And leaf propagation, where you take a succulent leaf, pull it off, and it will start to grow roots and new plants. This is an echeveria that I got at Costco. So first of all, this plant was originally, I had it planted in a much too shady spot. It got really long and leggy. And so I did the first method of propagating. I simply cut the stem of the rosette. That rosette, once the stem is calloused over, can be replaced into the soil and it will grow new roots. So that's one thing with succulents. You do want to make sure that you have calloused over any stems before you propagate them, before you cut and propagate. Succulents, what makes them drought tolerant plants and plants that don't need much water is they retain a lot of water in their leaves and their stems. So those stems full of water, when they're first cut, they are a little bit wet to the touch. That is the water that is within the plant, and that is really susceptible to rot. So cutting that, you want to leave it to dry out and be very dry to the touch, almost a little bit wrinkled. I leave it definitely more than a day. Succulents can last a really long time. And in fact, that's one trick to really ensure that you'll get some roots. Sometimes you cut it and just leave it out and leave it completely dry for a very long time before you place it into the soil. A lot of times the succulent stems will just automatically start throwing off roots. Here's a perfect example of a rosette that I clipped and I left out. This has been out for several weeks, and if you turn it over, you can see it is fully callous and it has some roots growing out. So I know it is ready to be put into soil. It's kind of what succulents do in the wild. They drop leaves, they break, and their stems will start to put out little aerial roots looking for soil, looking for the ground. So the roots come out whether they are in soil or not, and they're looking for the ground and they're looking for soil to regrow themselves. That is one of the easiest ways to repropagate plants. And in fact, sometimes it's happened by accident. Here's another succulent pot that is featured in other videos of mine. Here is one succulent in particular, And I think I showed this in my previous video. I have kids. My kids were out playing baseball or tennis or something, and a ball hit this succulent and broke the top of the stem off. Now, what is so nice about this succulent is even though it was broken, I got so many more succulents from this broken one than I had if it had just stayed in the soil. So I waited a couple of weeks. I repotted it back into the succulent arrangement that I was in. It's rooted. You can see it's very rooted in there now. It's not coming out. And then the stem of this plant, I kept it, made sure I kept it nice and dry. I repotted it in a small pot, and that stem has since grown more little rosettes. And that's what's really cool about succulents. You can cut the stem, replant the rosette, hold on to that stem, because those cut stems will often create a ton more plants with almost little to no effort because they're already rooted. So it's like, keep them in the pot that they're in, keep them on the ground. If they're happy, if they're in a location that they like, they will grow new plants. So that is one almost surefire way to grow new succulents from cuttings. So this is a great example of when you cut the rosette off the top of a succulent, it is more common than not for it to grow even more little buds out of the top. So that's a great way to make multiple plants. I could cut these and repropagate them, or keep them here in this pot to kind of fill it out. Another one of the most magic things about succulents is that they will grow new plants from just a leaf. Almost every single kind of succulent will do this. Almost every succulent. There's a few that do better than others. And you will start to notice, once you start doing it more often, you'll notice there's some leaves that are much better at doing this than others. Plants, I totally recommend doing it. Echeverias are great, especially when they've got a really thick leaf full of moisture. Graptivaria Fred Ives, which I've featured in another video, they're a hybrid of Echeverias and Graptopetalatums. Graptopetalatums, ghosties, they are one of the easiest plants to propagate. They're constantly dropping leaves, and those leaves will just start to root really easy. Sedum as well. Sedum are so easy to propagate. Jelly bean sedum in particular. I have a yard full of jelly bean sedum that started from cuttings, recuttings, leaf propagations. They're so easy to grow and propagate. So going back to this original Echeveria and what I did with this plant, to make this plant look a little bit better, I literally chopped off the rosette, let it callus for a few days, and I also carefully peeled off the leaves. So even just moving this plant, and this is the thing with succulents, they can be a little bit, they're pretty hardy for the most part, but sometimes their leaves get bumped, and that's one of the amazing things about this plant. It's designed to drop leaves on the ground and simply make a new plant. And that's another reason why it's really easy to propagate succulents. You don't have to do that much. You literally just place the leaf on the ground. So this leaf I've just sort of jiggled a little bit. I was going to go for the one below, but let's try this. So if I get a firm grip on it, you can kind of see at the end how it has just pulled itself off. I usually give a little twist, and this leaf is perfect for propagation. There's no cuts. It has a nice dimpling there. That's how you know you got it complete. It should be said as well, not every leaf is going to propagate. So for example, here's this other little Echeveria. You can see under here, and this is the thing that Echeverias do, it's dropped some dry leaves. Obviously this is not going to propagate. Something that's dried out like that, there's no moisture in there. This is no good. This is just leaf litter. That's not going to propagate. Here's like some good examples. So all these dried out leaves, they're no good. Here's one that's kind of, I'm gonna, as much as I can, try and get a firm grip on this one. And so this leaf, while it is whole, it's getting old. It's kind of turning yellow. It's got dimpling on it that kind of shows that it's not full of moisture. And there's a little bit of transparency on the side. So I feel like it's safe to say this leaf will not propagate. This is just kind of leaf litter, compost, a little bit like these. It's a little bit too old. You want to find a leaf that's not too old. So there is a little bit of a knack to choosing the right kind of succulent leaf. This is actually a pretty good leaf because it's nice and plump. There's no rot on it. It's not too dried out. And I know I got the complete leaf. You can see a little bit of a dimpling on the end. Sometimes it's very easy to break these leaves, but when they're nice and whole and complete like this, you can just place it on the table like I've done here with these and keep it nice and dry, and it will just start to grow roots. And the reason it's doing that, if you have your plant in the wild, it drops leaves on the soil, it'll grow a new plant. As simple as that. And honestly, you could just leave these out for a while. These ones are actually kind of perfect right now to be transplanted because the roots can dry out. And here's another one where you can actually see a little pup, a little bud of a plant is starting to grow out, and the roots are kind of drying. Here's one that's kind of turning brown. So let's do this together. Let's place these on soil and I'll show you the next step for these leaves. So this is my propagation station. And so propagating plants, in particular succulents, is obviously something that is a very big part of my life. So I am going to show you exactly my system for propagating plants wherever I get them, whether they are leaves that I have pulled off my own plants, as in are the case with a lot of these in this little propagation tray, or plants that I have found succulent leaves on the ground in garden centers, or sometimes they are stems of plants that I have chopped and repropagated elsewhere and held onto the stems. So this is my dry propagation tray. I showed you the leaves that were on my kind of patio table. Normally I would also just kind of throw leaves if I am repotting something and drop a leaf. It would be really common for me to just throw them into this tray and see what happens. And sometimes, you know, like this is a rotten leaf. I want to get that out of there. And I do try to keep this as dry as possible. And this isn't a perfect setup. Like, I will be the first to put my hands up and say this isn't perfect, because there probably could be a lot better aeration here, and sometimes there's some moisture gets in here because you really want to avoid getting moisture. But I kind of leave them in here just to see their viability. Like, this one's not looking good. I'm just gonna toss that. It's almost like a second thought. Like, these are plants that I'm like, oh, I just have some spare leaves, I'll just throw them in here. And if they start to grow, then obviously I'll keep them and start to plant them. So that's one thing. You can just like put them on here and forget about them and see if they grow roots, a lot like those other leaves that I showed earlier. And then we can go through and decide how or where we're going to plant them. I have a lot of these really nice small nursery pots. These are only about a 1-inch square, and these are kind of perfect for placing some of these leaves into to see if they'll start to grow a pup. That's where all of these little succulents have come from. They're little pups that have fallen off, whether they're cactus or succulents. So there's a few ways I could go about with these leaves now that they are ready to go into soil. Because they have roots, and in the case of this one, there's a little bud, I want to get these in soil so that now that they have roots, they can start taking on moisture and taking on nutrients that will help them grow into new plants. So I have these. These are really great little nursery pots. And I'm going to take this one. There's already some soil that's got a lot of organic material in it. I'm going to add some more cactus mix, which is a little bit more sandy, a little bit more dry, really great for drainage. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to lay that kind of in the middle there like that. Now, obviously it's a bit heavy, and you'll notice I am not burying the leaf. The temptation would be to stick that in the soil. And I find that that doesn't work very well because, as you can see with this example, the bud comes out of the bottom of the leaf. So the leaf is better off just laying flat on the soil like this. Let those roots find the soil themselves. And, it's not to say that the other way wouldn't work. I've just found that this works better. So I'm going to do a little trick to keep this little bud in the middle of this nursery pot, but also with this leaf because it needs to stay on the leaf. The leaf is providing nutrients and moisture and all the information that this plant needs to grow a new plant from the leaf. So we want to keep the leaf on there, and it will eventually dry up and fall off on its own. It's very important to note, don't pull off the leaf, let it fall off on its own. So I have this bit, this is just like kind of garden wire. I'm just going to very gently, this may or may not work, put that on there so that it just kind of stays on. Eventually the roots will go in and it will hold itself. So I don't want to damage the leaf. I don't want to cut it. I don't want any moisture to get inside this leaf because that will just cause it to rot. But see, this is it's a little bit precarious. It's not in very deep, but I'm just going to keep it like this. And this will eventually, I'm going to add this, put this over into my propagation station. This will start to grow a new little plant the same way all of these have done. And these all started as leaf propagations, every single one of these. So another really great way to get new plants from these succulent leaves, whether they have roots or whether they do not yet have roots, is to create a propagation tray with soil. So I have a ton of these recycled trays that came from food delivery. And I just fill them really shallow with cactus mix. Like, really what we're doing is we're just trying to encourage these to grow new little pups. So I'm just going to fill this up. Cactus mix is really, you can see how chunky it is. It's really well draining. This one in particular has a lot of, it looks like kind of like lava rocks or pumice. There's a little bit of organic material like little sticks and things, but not a ton. Usually there's added sand as well. I always say go for an organic soil, and really, really easy. We're just gonna place these on the tray like this. And knowing that the little pups are gonna come out of there, I'm gonna kind of arrange these around like this. I mean, I could put them right in the middle, but I find doing like this, that way the roots are kind of touching the soil. They will start to just go into the soil by themselves. And put all these ones with roots. And then same with these. These ones are the ones we just pulled off of the plant today. You could do the same thing. Just rest them on there. Don't bury them. Again, it's so tempting to think, oh, I'm going to put this like this and it's going to grow. Okay, it will, but I really have found that having it flat is just much more effective. So I'm going to do the same. I have a bunch of other plants here in this tray that I've been meaning to place. I kind of also go through these trays, it's almost like a little bit of an edit. Some of these you go through and you're like, leave it there for a while and that's not looking good. So I don't want to waste my time and space with that. Space is at a premium here for plants, but all these other ones that have already started to grow little buds, I'm going to place them in here. So sometimes when you have leaves, they start to go like this, kind of transparent and floppy. These are no good. These are dead. And if you keep these in this tray, they're likely to like even cause the moisture to make those rot. So just get rid of those. They don't always work. And that's one thing with this propagation. It is kind of a numbers game. So you'll notice I have like all of these. Not all of them are going to grow into plants, but that's okay because like look how many I have. It's okay if all of these, out of this handful, 3 are no good. This one, we'll see. It's pretty solid, but it's kind of a little bit yellow, so it may or may not work. Same with this one, but we'll put it in there, see what happens. So I know you're asking me, okay, you've got this tray, so now what? What do you do? So one thing you'll notice about my propagation station, it is not in the direct sunlight. This is sort of north facing, shall we say. So it's getting bright, but indirect light. So if you put bright direct light on these, they're very likely to get sunburned, shrivel up, get really hot, they cook. So we don't want that to happen. We do want them to be in bright light, but we want it to be indirect light. So I'm gonna place it here, right beside this tray, and I know that that is getting all of the indirect light. In the mornings, it might get some direct light, but you'll notice these are on like a second tray. The ones up here are getting a little bit more direct light sometimes a year in the morning, but down here it's a little bit more protected. It's not going to get that hot. It's not going to get that cold. We're in California, so we don't really get frost. That's another trick. Succulents don't want to be cold. Now you're wondering about watering, aren't you? I knew you would. Succulents really, they are drought tolerant plants, and the number one way to kill your succulents is to overwater them. And the same goes for propagations. Now, having said that, these have been out in the dry open air and not watered for a very long time. So those roots could do with a little bit of watering, and it's gonna kind of tell that plant, oh, look, I'm on soil, and get the soil a little bit moist, but we really don't want it to be oversaturated. I don't want these in a tray of water. And now, not all of these have roots. We have these two that don't have roots. If this was a tray of all leaves without roots, I wouldn't water this. I wouldn't water it until it had roots, but just for demonstration's sake, and because some of these do have roots, I have a little sprayer. I'm gonna set this to mist because I really don't want a ton of water. I'm gonna set it to mist, and I'm gonna give it a little bit of a spray. Not a lot, because they're not plants, they're just leaves. And then so that, top layer of soil, this tray I did, actually, there are some drainage holes in this, but a lot of trays don't have drainage holes. So another reason you don't want to put a ton of water in here, because succulents really do need drainage. So you just want to do a little layer of mist just to give them a notion of water, shall we say, until they grow into full plants. Once they're more full plants, then you'd give them much more of you'd make sure they were in a garden pot like this that does have drainage. Like here's our one we did earlier. There is drainage there. If I water this, the water is going to be able to soak through. These that actually have plants, I'm going to give that more of a deep soaking. I have a whole video about watering succulents. You should definitely check that out. It is probably one of my most viewed videos because people always wonder about watering succulents. So succulents like a really good deep watering. They want that water to drain off, and then they want to be completely dried out before you water them again. So do not water this tray again until that soil is completely dry. Here is a tray of succulents that I have watered, and they mostly all started from leaf propagations. You can see here's like a really nice example. This is a Fred Ives, and this is what I mean by don't pull the leaf off. The leaf will just shrivel up. The leaf is sustaining that little plant. I want to leave that there, leave it to do its thing. I'm going to go through, get rid of these dead ones. A lot of these, they have roots. They don't have pups yet, but they do have roots. So I will go through and water these, and some have already turned into the little buds or pups or whatever, and their leaves have already fallen off. So when do you transplant these? When do you plant them on their own? Great question. There's no right answer. In theory, as soon as they're kind of their own plant, like this one right here, or this one, you can actually see the roots. Here's the original leaf that it came from. The roots go all the way over there. I'm gonna very carefully remove that, roots and all. and I could pot this up. And I don't want to put this in a big pot. I want to put it in another one of these small ones like this. So I'm going to set that aside. But I'll kind of every so often, I'll go through here and double check this and see what looks ready for transplanting. And really, like, if it looks like it can, you know, its own solid plant, then you can totally plant that and transplant that on its own. But some of these really teeny tiny ones, I might leave them alone. Like, look how small that ghosty is. It's tiny. I'm going to leave it alone until it grows a little bit bigger. So that is the same type of plant as this. These were probably all placed here as ghosty leaves, and they've grown at different rates. That tiny one, not going to do anything with it. This one you could transplant. So here is that plant I just pulled out of the tray. Again, you can see this was a leaf propagation. There's the leaf is kind of dead and gone. Again, I don't want to mess with it. So I'm just going to add my cactus mix a little bit there, especially down at the bottom. Having that pumice there is really great for drainage. I have some other soil that has some kind of small bits of perlite, but we're just going to mix it up. And now I'm going to take these roots, add my finger in there. Again, I'm doing this all one-handed, holding the camera. Maybe not my best move, but these plants are pretty hardy. All right, now here we go. Add that in there. I'm gonna give it a little shake to make sure the soil's in there. It's kind of feels like it could be a little more upright, but overall, happy with this one. And now that it's in there, we know this has roots, so we can water it. And as you can see, this is draining. Very important. I'm going to give it a good soak so that the soil gets fully moist. And what I like to do as well is I usually like to put new plants. I usually put them on a little drainage tray like that, or in a cache pot. I don't really want the water to stay on the leaves of this plant, so I'm going to make sure that they're a little bit upright off the soil. But there we go. So this is a plant that started as a leaf, was added to this propagation tray, grew a little bud, grew some roots. The original leaf shriveled up and went away. We repotted it in a small pot. If I put this in too big of a pot, it would sort of be more likely to rot. So a small, little tiny small pot like this is ideal for these brand new baby little succulents. And now it's going to live here in my propagation station with all my collection of plants. And this should, in theory, grow bigger to be like this one. This is the same type of plant. So when I had that echeveria that was getting a little too leggy, I literally pulled it out of the flower pot like this. I kept the stem, and I'm going to repot this because it is quite likely that this will also grow some new little flower buds. So I'm just gonna throw this plant in a kind of a nursery pot. I'm not giving too much attention to it. And I'm going to add some cactus mix around it. We'll keep it at the propagation station because, you know, it's not exactly pretty, but it might give me some nice new plants. So we're going to save it, and we'll see what happens. So we'll hold on to this. We'll put it at the station. Might hide it back here. Let it do its thing, and hopefully it will start to grow some new little buds. If you go back here, I mentioned the other plant that was in an arrangement that got hit by a baseball or a tennis ball. Here's the stem, and I kept that stem. I repotted it, and we have got let's see, at least 1, 2, 3 little new rosettes that look really pretty in here. There's possibly more, but I mean, that was a broken stem and now it is a pot full of succulents. And not only that, but we kept the leaves. We laid those leaves down in a pot and we got these. So from this one plant getting broken by a tennis ball, here's what happened to the stem. And then a bunch of leaves got pulled off and laid on soil, and these are all leaf propagations from one plant. So one plant has now created 2 potfuls of succulents, and the original plant lives on. Here's an example of what I would do when it came to cutting a succulent rosette. So here's some aeoniums. They're getting a little leggy, not looking their best. So I know if I have my trusty clippers and if I simply, I'm gonna just cut this plant down here and I'm gonna leave this. I'm gonna leave this alone. This is planted in a garden. This is gonna just start growing new plants out on its own, and it will make this hole kind of get filled in and look so much better. Now this, I will trim it up, make it a little bit shorter, and take off all these dead leaves. I'm gonna cut it to just about here. I'm gonna let this callus over and completely dry off, or, you know, in theory, I could put this into very dry soil and not water it for a while, but just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna leave it out for a few days, place that in soil. This will root up and grow some new plants, and this stump will also start to grow new little buds out of it. And now I've kind of probably quadrupled my plant because several buds will grow out of here. Now, you'll notice I didn't keep the leaves of these. I have found aeonium leaves are a bit thin. They're a little harder to propagate, not impossible, but I haven't had much luck with them. Another great question, how long does it all take? So there's no right or wrong answer. The answer, it really does depend. So if conditions are right, if it's warm but not too hot, not cold, it will take way longer if it's cold. If they're getting the right amount of indirect sunlight, if they are nice and dry, if the leaf is really healthy, you can start to see roots. Roots themselves sometimes pop out within a couple of days to a week or two. Pups sometimes take a little bit longer. You might see a little pup within 2 to 4 weeks, maybe more like 6 weeks. For a full plant, that could take quite a lot longer. Some plants like the Graptopetalatum ghosties, they are really quick. You can get a whole new plant from just a leaf. I would say within 3 months, say, you'll get a full plant. Now, when I say a full plant, a full small plant, to get a succulent to a size like this, that does take quite a bit longer. It also has other factors such as pot size and light, etc. So hopefully that all makes sense. I should note that not all varieties of succulents will grow from just leaf propagations. A lot of the plants like Senecio varieties, these are like string of pearls, string of bananas, they do require the stem. I have a whole video about string of bananas. In fact, I have 2 videos about string of bananas, about how to propagate and get the best out of them. But for the most part, whenever you clip a stem of a succulent, you are very likely to get more succulents out of it. So to wrap it all up, succulents are a great way to get multiple plants from one. It is what Free Plants Forever is all about, whether that is from cutting a rosette and keeping the stem and replanting the rosette, whether that is from leaf propagation that you have pulled off of your plant or found on the ground or been given as a present. That's another great way to grow your plants. Keep your propagating plants relatively warm, very dry. Don't get them overly hot, don't get them overly cold. Make sure they have bright indirect light. Water really only when they have roots. There's no point in watering something that doesn't have roots. And hopefully with all of these tips, you can make tons of new plants for free. thank you so much for watching. I hope all of these succulent tips have been helpful. If there's anything you want to know or anything I didn't cover in these videos, please put it in the comments below. I try and reply to every comment, and I really do take your feedback to heart. Don't forget, you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, and don't forget to subscribe.
You have wonderful ideas. All you have to do is think about them.